Welcome to the Hidden Bookcase. Come through and get cozy. Pick a book, your favourite book, that's the one that opens this room. Inside you'll find a warm fire, a loving cat, and a wide skylight to the stars.
And a dangerously high to-be-read pile.
I'm Morgan, I use they-them pronouns, and I am MacGuffins all the way down.
I'm Soren, I use he-him pronouns, and I'm at least 4 separate guns.
We've been friends for over a decade and are always swapping books.
Each fortnight, we take it in turns to recommend one another a favourite read. The first-time reader tells us what they know about the book, makes some predictions about what they don't, and then we discuss our thoughts with all of you bookworms. On our shelf this month is Evelyn.
So today, let's get to talking about
The 7, or 7.5, Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton.
Straight out the gate, why did they rename it? The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle is such a banger title. And then they're like, no, we're going to make it boring.
This article just says it's because Americans die more frequently. Hang on, there might actually be a genuine reason.
What?
When asked about the change, US sourcebooks initially joked, our editorial team decided to supersize it. Oh, so it was published here first, and they upgraded it to the 7.5 Deaths. So I suppose that's why, so they just didn't think of it until later, and the improved title came second. I think we should name it the 7.5 Deaths, not just because we have more American listeners, hi guys, but because it's just a better name.
Where did you all come from? Oh my god.
How did you find us? So Morgan, what is the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle about?
The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle is about a man named Aidan Bishop who finds himself reliving the same day over and over in different bodies, trying to solve the death of Evelyn Hardcastle. And he has no memories of his life before, and it's all very messy.
That's pretty succinct.
Yeah, considering everything that happens in this book.
Exactly.
Yeah, where did I find the book, you may ask?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Where did you find the book?
That's a great question. I remember seeing it in Waterstones and being like, oh my gosh, that looks fun. And it's not my usual thing because it's in the general fiction section, which I would never go anywhere near if my life depended on it usually. But I picked it up, I read the back, and I realised that it was one of those books that's like general literary fiction, but it's actually genre fiction that they've managed to pass under the radar.
I feel like it's all about presentation. If something just suggests itself to be literary and serious enough, but then you look at it and you're like, this is science fiction.
Sometimes it's the author, I feel like, because the author is like an established travel writer.
So, I feel like I know very little about the 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. I repeatedly get it confused with the 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which is why we're doing Evelyn month, I guess. And I know that it's called the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle in the States. I'm not sure why that was localised differently for Britain. I think that was a weird choice because 7.5 Deaths is a much more intriguing name. I don't know how this character is supposed to die 7 times, presumably time loop. That's the only thing that I can think of, is perhaps that she's trapped in a time loop and trying to avert her own death, or that she fakes her death 7 times, maybe. But the fact that her name is still Evelyn Hardcastle kind of makes me think that it's not like she's cycling through 7 or 7.5 identities. So I guess I'll go with the time loop thing officially. And I don't know what the half could mean. I have some inkling that it's historical fiction, maybe? It's maybe just the cover that's making me think about the very historical staircase. I think it's sapphic, I believe. Maybe it's Hugo that's sapphic, but I can't remember. I feel like Morgan told me when we decided to do this, but yeah, so possibly time loop, possibly sapphic, possibly historical fiction, possibly historical science fiction, if I'm all right about the time loop thing.
I feel like we should say straight out the gate that this is the straightest book we've done. We are mainly doing it for the meme of Evelyn month, so...
I didn't realise this didn't have anything in it. There's a line that implies that Ravencourt might be gay, and I was actually like, oh, this is going to come out and it's actually going to be Cunningham, because the reason they said so was because there were like lots of young men go to his house late at night, and I was like, you know who else lives in his house? His valet, who is super hot, according to the narrator. So I was like, I bet it's him, but then that never manifested. No. So that can just be my little headcanon.
I really liked reading the body hopping from a trans perspective. Like, obviously Aidan Bishop probably isn't trans, but like from a trans perspective, body hopping narratives are my jam.
I kind of wish they'd done a little bit more in that respect, because when he's in Ravencourt, Aidan considers that he might end up in a female body, and then he's like, wow, my brain is scrambled eggs thinking about that. And then it just sort of doesn't happen. And I was a little bit disappointed because I think that could have really added to the mystery as well. It kind of also gets touched upon later when he's talking about Anna. He's like, well, she's a maid and she's a woman, so nobody's going to tell her anything, so she's never going to solve the mystery. But okay, fine, you're a woman, so the men aren't necessarily going to talk to you, but the value that could be extracted from being a woman being trusted. For example, when he's in John's body and he's trying to chase this random woman down, of course that's not going to work. But if you're a woman, even if you were like one of the high society women attending the party, you would get like a modicum of trust from this random maid. There was this like failure of imagination revelation for me that he was mainly just in upper class white men's bodies. There's only white people here, first of all, which, okay, fine, it's historical fiction, but people have existed, even in England, for a long time. And then he's in The Butler briefly, but that's kind of it.
Yeah, he spends most of The Butler asleep.
Which could have been interesting because he would have had a different perspective on everyone and everything. He would have seen different sides of people. He would have been able to just walk into the servants' corridors without people being like, what are you doing here? So I feel like that was a missed opportunity. And then also a missed opportunity to say something interesting about class.
I think that's the main thing that characterizes this book is ideas, but then just missing out on entirely almost all of the potential of every single idea that's brought up.
I kind of concur with that.
At the end of the day, this book is kind of about rehabilitation over prison abolition, and class commentary, but it does nothing with that. It kind of just has it there on the plate and is like, did it? And you're like,
did he though?
You've microwaved a meal. You haven't made me a 4-course dinner. Come on.
Okay, wait, we're getting really ahead of ourselves. Should we quickly talk about the covers? I think we have the same edition, which is The Staircase.
I have the sprayed edge Waterstone exclusive edition with the red sprayed edges.
Definitely added je ne sais quoi.
I do like the spine. I think the spine is really pretty with the sort of red and the white and then the black chest piece. I don't think the chest piece quite works on the front cover because it's just there.
It kind of looks like it's been photoshopped in. I mean, I assume it has been photoshopped in. Is it just that it doesn't have a shadow? It doesn't seem to... It does have a shadow, but it's not... Where's the light source? I'm not usually a fan of photographic covers. I think as an illustration, I would be all over this. Eating up the map on the inside. Absolutely loved that.
I love it. This isn't a book that needs a map. And does the map help in any way, shape or form? No. But is it beautiful?
I suppose the author probably did draw a map at some point, but I didn't get the sense reading it that there was that clear of an understanding of the house. But I'm never going to say no to a map.
I do like if you look at all of the important bedrooms, they've got little drawings in them that are meaningful. Ted Stanwin has a book. Millicent Darby has the bed she dies in, which is fun. The house itself is so majestic. Vine trellises. We do love a good vine trellis. And then, of course, we've got the dinner invitation as well.
Yes, that was cool. And that's a very clever way of actually, rather than just listing characters' names by rote or something, meta kind of way to include everyone's names and professions so that people can refer back if they need. It's not Sapphic. We said that.
No, Hugo is the Sapphic one.
Hugo's the Sapphic one. I was getting confused there.
But Evelyn Hugo was published in 2017.
Okay.
And Evelyn Hardcastle was published in 2018. But they were very popular around the same time. And at one point, the narrator is like, yeah, Evelyn wearing the green dress. And I was like, the green dress?
Well, not technically her, but
yeah,
the supposed Evelyn gets introduced in a green dress. And it's the first time you see her. So in my brain, that kind of stuck, even though she wears the blue gold ball gown later.
So my brain is just like, Evelyn Hugo and Evelyn Hardcastle, same person.
She's just been having a really different experience. I don't know what experience, because I still haven't read Hugo, but we'll see. Let's talk about the writing style.
I really like the writing style. I think it is the most compelling part of the book.
I completely agree with you. I had quite a lot of quotes towards the start, if I may, launch into quotes a bit earlier than usual.
Oh yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
Especially when Sebastian, quote unquote, is still trying to get his bearings. He says, I can sense my memories just out of reach. They have weight and shape like shrouded furniture in a darkened room. I simply misplaced the light to see them by. I really liked that. That's just a very nice metaphor and nicely executed. I appreciate that it's not florid language at any point. I mean, I love florid language. I love purple prose. I love fancy metaphors and the stupid vocabulary. But this is nice, and I think it lends some character to Aidan. He's not like that. He'll just simply explain something, but in a compelling way.
I love one by one I knit these new memories together until I've got 5 minutes of past to wrap myself in. Vibey.
The way that Turton deals with emotion is very physical. The anger's solid, it has weight, you can beat your fists against it. Pity's a fog to become lost within.
I make bricks of her laughter, her touch, her kindness and warmth, and only when I'm content my wall is high enough do I resume my study of the sunroom.
This guy can write, I'm not disputing that.
Just the first line, I forget everything between footsteps, immediately starts off the narrative. You're thrown in right there along with Aidan. Just such a banger line.
Yeah, the whole first chapter I really, really liked, actually. It just ensnares you. I think it's dangerous starting in the middle of an action scene, and then even more dangerous starting in the middle of an action scene with a character that doesn't know even who they are, because you're like, well, why should I care? But I think the prose does carry it, at least to begin with. That breaks down, unfortunately, as the novel continues, at least for me.
Not remembering much of it, because I read it quite a long time ago. Any important character that Aidan meets, it's probably just him from the future. Going into it with that mindset was very funny. Remembering that he's the one who slips the pocket watch into his pocket. You're so confused. You're scaring yourself, babes. Sit down for 5 minutes and maybe everything will be easier.
I do have to say, though, as soon as Daniel was like, I'm you from the future, I was like, no, you're not, you liar. Like, immediately, I was like...
You figured it out?
Yeah, like, the minute he said it, I was like, no, you're not. Why would you say that? Because none of the others have said that. Everyone else has been too busy running around trying to sort out their mystery and things. For some reason, to me, that was just deeply obvious. I don't know. Especially it became more and more obvious as Daniel was clearly just so different as a person to Aidan, and Aidan was sitting there being like, how am I going to be so morally corrupted in the space of 2 days that I murder a man in cold blood? And I'm like, you're not. That's just somebody else, babe.
Yeah. On rereading it, I was like, you're spending a lot of time with the other people when you don't both have to be experiencing this. You need to be doing other things.
It bothered me, both that he kept spending time overlapping with himself unnecessarily, and also that he didn't really make much attempt to interrogate the rules of the world and the rules of the loop. I mean, he did test, I suppose, with the attempt to escape, but for example, when he goes, maybe I'll flip the chessboard. No, I won't, that'd be embarrassing. It's not really about being embarrassing at this point, man. Everyone's going to forget tomorrow anyway, come on. I appreciate that that's like a realistic possibility, but there were many ways in which he could have done something like that. Set up a tripwire outside Sebastian's door so that he falls flat on his face. That didn't happen to you yesterday. And then because there was no testing of the rules, there wasn't really an establishing of the rules, which was kind of difficult for me as a reader.
I did like the revealing of little things that happen and being like, how does this fit together?
When you didn't know how it would happen or like why it would be a logical thing to do, and then in retrospect it was. I did enjoy that.
Oh, I do love a time loop. Every time there's a time loop, I'm like, this slaps. And then to spice it up with also having it in different bodies and then having yourself being able to interact with those other bodies, that's just ingenious to me.
I also really liked that there was elements of personality being carried over to Aidan, because at least from a boring psychology point of view, that makes complete sense. We are so much nature and not nurture. So if you are in somebody's brain, I mean, I won't think too hard how this is actually happening because I'll go mad. But presuming that you have their hormonal imbalances and stuff, you know, you're actually going to be quite a lot like this person in theory.
One thing that started to drive me mad the more and more it went through, someone's going to die at Blackheath. It's Evelyn Hardcastle. One person dies. So many people die in this book, but the only person we care about is Evelyn Hardcastle.
Exactly.
Like,
also, it really bothered me that the Wardens didn't actually have the correct story. They seemingly have the power to restart the loop infinite times. Is there a cost to the loop? I assume no, because otherwise you wouldn't be using it to torture criminals. You can't let people out on the wrong murder case. Not even the wrong murderer, the wrong murder case. You didn't, like, follow everybody individually in the house. Maybe there were, like, 200 people there and it would have taken 200 days, but you have infinite days. You need to figure out what's actually happening before you set loose a pack of random war criminals.
But the whole point is that they don't know what happened.
But how can they not know what happened if they have access to just looping it forever?
Because it's the criminal's job to figure it out.
And you're doing that by wiping their memory every day? That seems so insane. Like, I want to know what's going on in this world where that's the decision-making process for solving cold cases. What is happening?
Genuinely, I want to know what's happening in the OG world, because it's so, like, what? How do you know that the 8 people you've picked as hosts weren't the murderers? Like, what did they do on the original day that this whole thing is based on? Because they clearly didn't do whatever Aidan made them do, because Aidan's like moving them around in different ways. Yeah,
I feel like there was a lot of butterfly effect stuff. I was trying not to think about it because it was stressing me out, but when little things changed and then bigger things didn't necessarily change as a result, and I was like, surely that should have chain reacted. Like, if this person wasn't here at this time, that's going to then cause problems. I appreciate that the loop has to be able to change, otherwise there's literally no story here. But
the main issue that I had when I got to the end was who killed Evelyn Hardcastle? Felicity Maddox. But if it had gone how it should have gone, Felicity Maddox would have been dead because Michael would have shot her, and then Michael would have died because he drank the poisoned whiskey, and Evelyn would have just left. Felicity should not have been alive to kill Evelyn, and also the only reason she knew where Evelyn was because the plague doctor intervened and told her. So in the original day, Evelyn got off scot-free.
Exactly.
I would have loved to see dream sequences of the previous loops. Any exploration of Aidan killing Anna so many times.
Yeah, and I feel like those would have been very interesting moments to hint at it, and then that would have been a good moment of foreshadowing. But as it was, it kind of felt a bit out of left field to me. This is completely unrelated, but I do feel like we need to address all of Aidan's fatphobia towards Ravencourt. It just felt mean, and it didn't feel like it was supposed to be character development.
No, it's just graphic.
Also, the fact that it was the most noticeable thing about Ravencourt. He kept being like, oh, he was smart, but I was like, I don't feel like he was particularly smarter than anybody else. That wasn't demonstrated to me. You're just telling me that apparently he had a more quick mind than everybody else. But that seemed like his trait. And I'm like, I'm sure that he's a fully realised person like everybody else here.
I don't want to put things on the author, but it did feel like internalized fatphobia, very specifically. There was one line which I was like, oh, you are attempting to do something, but you're literally not attempting at all. When he's at dinner and he says, how could he eat this much? What hollow is he attempting to fill? As somebody who has suffered with binge eating disorder for their whole life, I would have liked to see more of that exploration and talk about the fact that it's got nothing to do with hunger and with quote unquote greed, which is this horrible stereotype we have around fat characters. And it's entirely to do with mental health. I would have liked to see that. It could have been something actually interesting to be explored, but it was just a single line.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me that you read that way, because I interpreted it in kind of just a straight fatphobia way, but I think it could have been really interesting. I was thinking about this more generally. I was like, if a character had like any kind of mental illness, like a character with anxiety or something, that could have been interesting, because that should theoretically still have affected protagonists. So I think an eating disorder could also have been a really interesting one, but I was just reading it as like this is obviously what all fat people are like, and obviously you could just be fat because that's your genetics. Like, that's just how it works. To me, I was like, oh, what does that mean? Like, do you think that all fat people have something inherently wrong with them because that's why they eat? That was how it struck me. But could easily be that he was trying to do something there. This is some facet of Ravencourt's personality that...
Yeah. If he was trying to do anything, he failed and he didn't try very hard. So we're not giving him any credit.
Yeah.
I've never seen anybody mention it. Multiple people I've talked to about this book, I've been like, oh yeah, we're doing this book. And they're like, oh my God, I love that book. And I'm like, the fat phobia is really hard to get through. And they're like, oh yeah, it is. It's sort of an afterthought.
I feel like you should be listing that up front because it's potentially triggering. And also similarly, I don't know how necessary it was to have John just be a rapist. I didn't love that.
It was not well handled. It was not thought through.
No.
It was kind of like, I'm going to say something here. But did you?
Because I feel like what it was saying is, because Aidan was struggling with it, oh, it's not John's fault, this is just how he is. Which I'm not trying to put that on the author. I'm not saying that that's what the author was trying to say, but that's kind of how it came off to me.
If they'd more addressed, like, Darby's complete lack of impulse control.
Yeah.
Because he does have that, and he's characterised by that. And it would have been interesting if they'd explored that. But you don't have to explore it through that particular line of thinking. It could have been literally anything else.
I just don't really feel like it was very sensitively handled either. It was just sort of another obstacle for Aidan to try and get around. None of the women want to engage with him. Generally with sexual assault, I just don't really love it being in a book. No. Even violence in general, which I think is why so much of the random murder in this was kind of objectionable to me. I would kind of rather that you're saying something if you're going to put these things into a book. And I don't feel like anything was being said. It kind of felt like, you know when you really young kids writing and they start throwing in murder and stuff because they're like, wow, I can do that. I have that freedom. Isn't it shocking? Even this whole thing just being a cold case lent to the whole, okay, so what's the point for me? Because we've solved it, but nothing meaningful has changed. These people all murdered each other however many hundred years ago. And so why did we just spend 500 pages trying to figure that out? I don't really care.
Yeah, because also, like, she wouldn't have switched guns, so nobody killed Evelyn Hardcastle. And Michael killed Felicity. Although I guess in the original, Felicity would have killed herself, so it actually was Michael and Evelyn. But still... Also, the fact that the time loop changes halfway through and he's like, I can change the time loop, and then it's never brought up again. And also, that's not how the time loop works, so how can he change the time loop? But he did.
Even the fact that he is interacting with himself, fantastic idea. But what's the metaphor they use? They're like, those are shadows and you're going to escape here with the flame. But I'm like, so you fractured his consciousness into 8 different people? Or... what is going on there? Like, I feel like that is very much just sort of like, don't think about it, it's fine. Surely there are different parallel universe versions of yourself that you are now, like, consigning to oblivion here. Which is fine. I think that's also an interesting idea that, okay, I'm the one that gets out, which means that all these previous versions of me, I have to abandon. Fine. But I feel like Turton just did not want to talk about it. Because, like, there's our version of Aidan that is experiencing the day for the first time with Sebastian Bell today, and he's running around panicking, and he doesn't even know what's going on yet. And then today is also the end of the loop for Aidan, who fixes it and goes, yeah, Evelyn killed Evelyn, haha. So what about that original piece of his consciousness or whatever that's in that guy? Does it just not exist anymore? And also, if they have access to this technology, can they not just redeemify people with, like, some kind of beam? Because what the hell is going on?
I want to know how the magic system works.
Like, what are the rules? I need to know the rules, or else I can't be invested, because it is like, well, anything could happen at this point. Like, someone could just swoop in and be like, I'm Metro Man, and I think that this whole thing is wrong, so I'm going to rescue you, and that feels as believable as anything else that's happening here.
Yeah. And why does Aidan get 8 hosts?
Because the warden was like, I don't think it's fair that you only get one day like everybody else because you came in here.
So you get 8 really specifically. But we're still going to wipe your consciousness at the end. We're not going to give you the rules at the beginning. And we're also not going to take you out, even though you've lost your mind.
And he can do this thing where he, like, puts people into different hosts and things, but then he has to turn up to tell him the rules, even though the others just get the rules into their brain.
Also, he's like, oh, I fully changed things from before the loop started. Like, Ration isn't supposed to wake up in a cupboard, but he does. But he didn't wake up in the cupboard originally. You've already changed something about the loop before it's even started.
I don't know, man. On some level, I'm like, is it just that I'm not getting this? But I kind of don't think it's just that I'm not getting this. I think it's just... I don't feel like I'm in a story. I feel like I'm reading a book here. Especially as time drew on, I was reading it out of academic curiosity as opposed to genuine investment or care for the characters. Because I felt like everything had been set up in this really specific way so that the narrative would work, rather than the characters were acting naturally. I was just looking at the artifice, trying to watch the play, seeing all the stagehands running around.
This is one of those books where it's in literary fiction and people go, oh my god, it's ingenious. But if it had been shelved under sci-fi fantasy, it would have been torn apart. I think one of the reasons we are not enjoying it as much is because we have seen this trope played out so many times, so we know how to do it better.
Yeah, as I was reading this, I was like, what do you need for a good time loop? And I was like, I think one of the reasons that a time loop is so often a single episode of a longer running thing, like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is a fantastic time loop example, All Through 59, things like that, is because you really care about these characters by the time that they're in a time loop, so you're so invested in them getting out of a time loop. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. also has the thing of we'll die if we don't solve the time loop, so that's immediately like important stakes, whereas here, if they don't solve the time loop, they just wake up again, and Infinite Monkeys with Typewriters, eventually they'll solve it and they'll get out. So why do I care? And also, I know it's going to be this one because I'm reading the book, so this is the one where they solve it. So you need to make me forget that as an author, because I'm trying to forget it. I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt. I'm trying to be invested. But I do know that at the end of the day. So I need to care that it's this one.
If anything, I would have wanted shorter and seeing two different loops and seeing different setups. I needed more than just this loop. I needed either memories of the old loops and why they didn't work, or a second loop where he remembers more of the last loop, or he remembers himself, and that changes how he addresses the loop.
He's saying, oh, you're making the same mistakes, you have to stop making the same mistakes. And then he just stops making the same mistakes. But what caused that? I don't understand that. It wasn't character development, so was it just like random coincidences of other things happening? Butterfly effects that we, as the reader, aren't privy to? Was it just the Plague Doctor giving him different specific information? Which, again, it's infinity, so he has infinity chances to try it, so eventually it's going to work. The other major thing to make a time loop have stakes, if you don't have a limited number of times for the gang to solve it before they run out of chances, is to have that one character that remembers the time loop. For example, All Through 59 does this. Lovelace is the only one that remembers the time loop, and she does technically have infinite chances to fix it, but through montages and through seeing lots of different loops with her, you can also see her slowly losing her mind. There is an incentive to solve the time loop, so that this character that you know and care about does not go insane. If she was also forgetting, then they would just be in a time loop forever.
Yeah, I feel like time loops only ever work if there is one character who remembers. Like, that's the whole fun of it, is the one character who remembers, who you follow around, who's usually not necessarily so much of a main character, and you get to actually look into their perspective in a way you don't usually. The whole point of the time loop is a bottle episode for character growth.
Maybe this is also a symptom of, if you're really used to the medium, you're thinking of all of the tricks. For example, with S.H.I.E.L.D., they do the thing of, this is about to happen, this is about to happen, so they can very quickly convince people that they're in a time loop. And Aidan does this here with Cunningham. He goes, here's the note, here's everything that happens in the dining room exactly as it happens, so that he can get Cunningham in on it. Do that to Evelyn, who you think is going to be murdered. Tell Evelyn, hey, I'm in a time loop, I'm trying to solve your murder. There's no rule against it, so why wouldn't you at least try that? Or just, you're in a time loop, tail people. Tail your murder victim all day, and you will have lots of really important information, as opposed to running around like a headless chicken. There were a couple of times where that wasn't possible, like Ravencourt couldn't move around, fine, he can't do it, but...
The one time constraint that is here is the fact that he only has 8 chances to do it. But because he has no memory, the first 4 chances are thrown straight out the window because he's around, like, doing other stuff and trying to get out of it in ways he's been told he can't get out of it.
And I feel like the only reason he wakes up not knowing is a meta reason. It's because the author didn't want you to know yet what was going on. If the others can wake up with that memory, then why can't Aidan? There's no meaningful in-universe reason, so it's an out-of-universe reason. It's like a Watsonian dualist thing. And there's too many of those. Should we talk about characters? We haven't done that. Did you have a favourite?
On my first read, my favourite character was Coleridge, because he was the only one who was vaguely interesting.
That's fair.
On my second read, the most interesting character, Sebastian Bell. He was a man in retreat of himself. I really liked that line.
Aidan was so judgy about him being a drug dealer. I was like, Christ, is it that big of a deal?
It's like, okay, I feel like we're coming from different moral standpoints here, Mr. Turton. Okay.
Which was also bizarre because I'm like, if you're from this time period, then like surely laudanum's not like a huge deal. But then also, maybe in the future it is. But also, you came in here to torture Anna. How do I get a grasp on Aidan as a person? Because apparently he really doesn't like drugs. But where does that come from? What's that about?
His sister was a cop, so...
That's true.
Already, we've got some bad vibes going on.
This whole thing felt very pro-cop, actually. The Constable as well.
It's very weird with the way the world is now. People who are still pro-cop confuse me. And I know this was written before 2020.
That said, the Ferguson protests were in 2014. I don't really feel like that's an excuse.
It throws me when people are like, anti-drugs, pro-cop.
I feel like in trying to make Aidan a blank slate, those are the traits that were chosen. Because the author assumed there'd be universal opinions.
It's very jarring. Did you have any favourite characters, Soren?
I liked Cunningham. I don't know really particularly why. I liked that he was so quickly on board with the time loop thing. Well, I liked his little vibe with the cop and his wife. They had like a cute little friendship going on. That was nice.
That was honestly my favourite part of the book. They were adorable.
I feel like it's because you felt like they had history together. When the Constable is like, can I ask you something? And Cunningham's like, I'm not getting in the middle of a fight between you two. Just admit that she's right.
Give me this book from his point of view.
You just wake up and you're like, my employer's acting really weird. And then he's like, cut on a time loop trying to solve a murder. And then you keep meeting different versions of him.
Oh, the absolutely gut-wrenching reveal that the Constable is actually just Aidan with a different hat on.
Yeah, and I feel like that would have been really interesting from his point of view as well, because it's like, this is my friend. Gravencourt was mean, so I guess I don't care if he's coming back. But this is my guy. What if he's gone forever now? You possessed him. Where is he right now? Is he okay? I don't know.
Yeah, and at the end of this day, Rashton is like slashed up by the footman and murdered very brutally.
Exactly.
I would have liked to see Felicity Maddox have an actual personality. She seemed very assertive sometimes, but then also is just kind of like, There's just no consistent characterization for anybody. And you could make a whole thing of that about how they're treating Aidan differently in different bodies and showing a different side of themselves. But that is only vaguely addressed.
For example, the complete animosity towards Ravencourt. I guess that makes sense if she's trying to be in character as Evelyn, but also she's acting. How good of an actor is she? Okay, you don't want to be like too friendly towards them because then people are going to be like, well, why did she kill herself? Because apparently she really liked that random 60-year-old man she was engaged to. But I think the safest way to play it would be to be like fairly neutral and maybe a little bit reticent.
And like when she's walking through the woods with Sebastian Bell, telling Evelyn's backstory and being like, oh, this is what happened to Charlie and Thomas. And my mother has hated me all this time. It seems very in character, very in depth. And it's like, you're my only friend in this place, Mr. Bell. None of that really tracks. Why is she doing that? Why is Felicity doing that?
I could see Evelyn being like, oh, you heard a murder in the woods? That's interesting, based on what we know of her now. But why does Felicity want to know about a murder? Is she just worried that it's going to like play into the plan, which I guess is concerning? That are we going to go off alone with Sebastian to do that? What if you run into somebody who knows what Evelyn is supposed to look like? Because that also, very convenient that certain people weren't in the... I mean, I know certain people were dead, but like... I was waiting for that.
And why was Evelyn leaving Felicity notes at the well when she's literally posing as her maid and could have just had a conversation with her?
That's a very good point. I didn't even think about that. Aidan didn't really feel consistent to me either.
There is a line when he's Gregory Gold that implies that he's brought along the quote-unquote soul of every single person he's been in, and they're all jostling for view. I would have liked some more exploration of that, because that's horrifying.
Yeah, when he woke up in the Constable, he says something like, oh yeah, I'm the Constable, I have a wife, and I have a sister, and I have parents. By rote, explains like who he is. And then he's like, wow, it's getting so hard to figure out who's me. And I'm like, that didn't feel like it was difficult. Like, I don't wake up in the morning and go, I'm Soren, I have a father and a cousin. That's not how it works. I think, I should call Dad. Oh no, I won't call Dad. He's overseas at the moment. If he had like slipped into that, and he kind of did it with Gregory Gold at the very end, but I would have liked to see a little bit more of that. She was like, oh, am I out here to paint? What am I doing here? That felt more compelling as like I'm losing myself. It would have been cool to see that introduced earlier.
I definitely think Gregory Gold was the most compelling host. The way he talked about the way he wanted to paint things. The butler's face becomes beautiful in his eyes, I think is something he says. Yeah. He's like, oh my gosh, I would paint this so beautifully. More of that change in vibe.
They didn't feel that distinct to me apart from Gold. You could really have done something really fun with the writing style here and just gone crazy different between each person. I think it would have been difficult to continue the thread of Aidan through that, but I think it's theoretically possible if you were doing something with like a body hopping thing. I think that could have been cool.
Soren, what are your final thoughts?
I've got to admit I didn't really enjoy this. I liked it at the start, and then it just kind of lost me as I was not digging into any of the characters. By the end of this, I didn't care if Aidan and Anna escaped, which I think is really important for this kind of book. Turton can write, his prose is good, his pacing is good, but this felt more an exercise in, look how fanciful of a plot I can make, but it's just the Rupi Goldberg machine. It's not actually a mystery. So this is a 2 from me, which is my lowest rating ever. Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Morgan, what are your final thoughts?
This shows how much I've grown as a reader. My original rating was 5 stars when I first read it. My rating now is 3 stars because I do think that the writing style is very good. I think that Turton is a very good writer. I just think that this had great ideas and proceeded to not deliver on a single one of them. And this is our first fail of the Hidden Bookcase.
It was going to happen eventually. I'm quite excited that this
is exciting. We've reached a milestone. I think the thing we've learned from this book is we should just never do a straight book on this podcast.
If people enjoyed the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, what do you think they should read?
You should go listen to Hit Replay.
Yeah, definitely.
If you want spicy time loop vibes.
Which is a limited series audio drama by L.M. Clahessy, who may direct the Attic Monologues, which is the other Plain Our Prod show. So you can take this recommendation with a bit of a grain of salt, but I personally am not involved in Hit Replay in any capacity. Morgan is, but I'm not, and I've been absolutely enjoying every single episode so much as a listener. It's been so consistently fantastic.
Yeah, I think by the time this episode comes out, all 13 episodes will be out, so... If you liked this book, I'm going to go on a real rogue one, but The Atlas 6 by Olivie Blake is what I'm going to rec. Because if you want, specifically in the Atlas Paradox, if you like the spiciness of time looping and not being able to change your choices, but you want actually interesting explorations of how a character doesn't believe they're going to get to that point, but they do. So that's the best time loop I can think of in literature that I would recommend. Otherwise, you should watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because they have 2 different time loops. They have season 5 and then they have season 7, episode 9. The whole of season 5 is a time loop and it's really well done, except for like the tiny last bit which doesn't make sense because how did they get out of the loop? But it's fine. It's one single thing, so it's okay.
I somehow completely forgot about the season 5 time loop. I was thinking about season 7 when I was talking about S.H.I.E.L.D. earlier.
Yeah, the season 7 episode is the classic bottle episode. Soren, what's your recommendation?
I'm going to sneak in another non-book recommendation, and that is Spire, which is a audio drama about Malachi and Cosima, 2 people who live in a strange multi-leveled city and start switching bodies. I think it does a lot of the exploration that I would have liked to see more of here in terms of how they're received in different bodies, in terms of what it's like getting used to being in somebody else's body, and then as the show goes on, losing yourself by being trapped inside another person, and then maybe reality is a little bit more complicated than it looks, but it's really, really worth listening to. It's some of the best audio drama out there right now. I believe season 1 will have just finished when this airs. The other thing that I was going to recommend sort of plays with a similar twist to Evelyn Hardcastle. I don't really want to give it away. I feel like most people have read this one by now because it's a bit of a lesbian classic, but it's Fingersmith by Sarah Waters.
I've never read it before.
Which follows a woman posing as a maid to help a con man rob a young lady and heiress of her fortune. It has a lot of twists and suspense. It's also historical fiction. It feels complex in a way that's similar to Evelyn Hardcastle while being a little bit less convoluted. There were 1 or 2 things about it that I thought felt kind of like far reaches, but I think it's much, much more successful, much, much more suspenseful, and the character writing is absolutely miles better. On our next episode, we will be completing The Evelyns, and we will be reading The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and we're going to be reading this along with a guest, Izzy, who has been our friend for many, many years, so we're very excited to have her on the show.
Until then, you're always welcome through the bookcase.
Don't forget to scratch the cat on your way out. Thank you for listening to The Hidden Bookcase, a production of Plain Our Prod. On this episode, you heard Morgan Greensmith and Soren Briarwood discussing The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. You can find Turton at stuartturton.wordpress.com, and you can follow him at stu_Turton on Twitter. You can find The Hidden Bookcase on Twitter at Hidden Bookcase and on Instagram, Facebook, Tumblr and TikTok at Hidden Bookcase Podcast. Find out more about Plain Our Prod at plainaurprod.com. Know what we should read next, or want to chat to us about what you thought of this episode's read? You can reach us at thehiddenbookcase@gmail.com or send us a DM on social media. We'd love to hear from you. If you're enjoying The Hidden Bookcase, please consider leaving us a rating or a review. Or you can always tell a friend how to find us. Your whispers are the best way for bookworms to discover our show. On our next episode, which will be out on Monday, the 17th of April, we'll be discussing The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, alongside new guest Isabel Kenny Herbert. We hope to see you then, and in the meantime, you're always welcome through the bookcase.